Okay, folks, we're going to get started here with our episode 10 of our Drench Line podcast. Had the opportunity to come down to San Antonio, Sam and myself, and sit down with Dr. Brian Faris, who's the director for competitive events here at the San Antonio Livestock Show and Rodeo. And first of all, before we kind of get started, we, from the Drench Line crew, definitely want to thank him and certainly appreciate the time and the effort and the willingness that he has went through to have a very open kind of conversation and dialogue with us. We're going to kind of dig in and dive through all kinds of stuff. We're going to get some backstory on San Antonio. We're going to get some backstory on where he came from and kind of how he landed in this role and what that looks like. And hopefully, at the same time, maybe answer some questions, go through some transparency, have some dialogue. I'm sure there will be plenty of opportunities to agree. There will be plenty to disagree. There will be some agree to disagree.
Always.
Like anything. So, but certainly, I know that he is a busy person, and, we think about stock show season and we think about San Antonio and January to February, and from an outsider looking in, hate to be the bearer of bad news or whatever you want to call it, but those shows don't just happen
overnight.
January 1 to,
I think we kind of forget as showers that we just show up in February, and that's when we start thinking about it really in February, San Antonio. But this is 12 months out of the year for you. So as Logan said, I want to back him up what he said. Appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. Not many places in the world could we sit down with, the competitive events director at a major
Absolutely.
stock show and get some questions answered. So humbled, to say the least. Thank you very much.
For sure. So we're gonna get started, and I would like to, before we do, just kind of let Dr. Faris kind of give us a little bit of background and kind of what his career trajectory looked like and how he ended up in a very coveted position. I'm sure a stressful position. I'm sure, probably about Valentine's Day, you kind of wonder what it would be like, if you were doing something else. But if you don't mind, kind of give us a little history on kind of how you got to this point.
Sure. Well, grew up born in Midland. Dad was a county agent at that time in Stanton and Martin County, and had we stayed up there, I'd have probably been a cattle kid, and as fate would have it, he was there for 5 years, and then we moved to Sutton County in Sonora in 1979, and then that's heart of sheep and goat country. I grew up a sheep and goat kid, heavily involved in 4-H, obviously, with my dad being the county extension agent. And probably the thrill for me was getting to go with him every summer and work people's livestock. And, when everybody was going through weaning and shipping lambs and such, then we were working through ewes and culling ewes, and then in the fall trying to go out and buy rams for folks. And so got to really see a lot of different aspects of the commercial industry. But then, also we showed heavily. I guess I started raising registered sheep when I was 6 years old, got my first flock of 8, and while we focused on those registered sheep, still showed a lot of market lambs. My first lamb was a South Down that showed at the Hill District or Hill Country District Junior Livestock Show in Kerrville when I was 6, and that story for another time. But it's one of those things, when you have a terminal project for a 6-year-old, you might want to go ahead and let them know that that's going to be a terminal project and not, or you'll be finding out that you carry your lamb's leg through the sale ring.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of those things that's part of the growing part of our industry. And so, grew up doing 4-H and was on several of the leadership in my club as an officer, and then ended up vice president of District 13 at that time, the old District 13, and then was on Texas 4-H Council. And so had a lot of opportunities that 4-H afforded me, and I attribute a lot of my successes in life to growing up in the 4-H program.
Sure. I think everybody that's listeners and obviously folks that are close to our program and Sam's and involved in that can certainly contribute to that. So after that, end up at Texas A&M?
After high school, graduated, went to Texas A&M with the idea I was going animal science option, but I was going to go to med school and be an optometrist. Professors didn't give me good enough grades so I could get into med school. So I think I like to use that as an excuse, but I think more than anything, my heart just wasn't into going that route. And it wasn't for a lack of advising, because I had Dr. Skaggs as my advisor, and so I think it was just my heart telling me I needed to stay in agriculture. And as I got closer and closer to the end of my career at A&M, the whole time, I guess my sophomore year, I started working at the Sheep and Goat Center. Dr. Ramsey came on in the spring of that year, and so I've got to know Dr. Ramsey and share a lot of time with him over the years. And but you know, upon graduation, kind of thought, what am I going to do now? At that point, Raina and I got married, and she went into Blend's dental hygiene program, and so I waited a little bit, built houses for a year and a half, waited for her to graduate and get out of that program, and then she started dental hygiene in Angelo, and I started my master's because at that point I'd had a heart-to-heart with myself and with her, and I'd figured somebody needed to be the new Texas sheep and goat specialist whenever her dad was going to retire at some point. Everybody knows, well, it's sad to say, I don't know that everybody does know Dr. Frank Craddock anymore.
There's probably a new wave, and I would say from our standpoint, some listeners that are maybe new to the game and that might not. So yeah, hit on that just briefly.
One of the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I was extremely fortunate, and I think I'd probably take it for granted how fortunate I was to have probably, I'm a little biased, but probably one of the best county extension agents that there's ever had the position in my dad, and Preston Faris, and to be mentored by him, and then to also have Frank Craddock as the Texas sheep and goat specialist that was very close to Dad. They all grew up together. They went to A&M together, were on livestock judging team together, and then their careers took them into the same line of work. And so relied, a lot on him in terms of my sheep background and my education there also. And then you throw Norman Coles in that mix. Yeah. I mean, Norman has done it all as a county agent as well, from pigs to cattle to sheep and goats. He's been heavily involved in all of it. And so when you've got those three that are in your corner, man, that's hard to get around. And so put a lot of pressure on me too whenever I came back to San Antonio in 2006 and judged the Market Goat Show for the first time. And man, that was a lot of eyes that are on you. But yeah, so that's where, having those kind of guys to look up to, but knowing Frank's path and that he grew up in it, was born and raised in it, and I knew that we needed to keep somebody that grew up in the program, from a commercial side, from a registered side, from a youth side, to try to maintain that continuity. So that's what I set my sights on, and had a long visit with my dad about it, and he said, well, you're going to have to go back and go to school and get a PhD. So started at Angelo State, got a master's there. Dr. Ingdahl did me real good there, and then moved out to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and did a PhD program under Dr. Tim Ross out there, and in repro. And then the whole time wanting to become an extension specialist, you go through some of these steps, because you have to get to that bigger goal. Sure. And so once I got my PhD, Dr. Mark Wise was the department head out there at that time, and he walked in with a job description of a 4-H youth livestock position open at North Carolina State University, and I thought, this is the dream job. Look at the description, and you get to impact kids every day, and you get to work with livestock. What better could happen to you. I was fortunate enough to get that position. We moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, lived just outside of Raleigh, and we're only there for about 3.5 years, but probably have made some of our dearest friends along the way in that camp.
You were there. You said you were there about 3.5 years.
3.5 years. Yep.
And then moved to.
Then we moved to Kansas, and so had a gentleman that I had coached against when I was on the A&M wool judging team. He was coaching K-State, and then when I was coaching at Angelo State, New Mexico State, he was still coaching Kansas State, but Clifford Spaeth. And Cliff grew up in Doss, and so he was from that Fredericksburg, Harper, Mason area, and so, but he was the sheep specialist up there in Kansas for years. You know, a lot of those guys up there had commercial operations just like our guys did, but they were running accelerated programs. 3 and 2, their sheep did not look like our sheep.
Yep.
There were a lot of outside influences, Romanoff in there, a lot of polypays, and then working with Dr. Craig Laymaster up at Meat Animal Research Center at Clay Center. They had developed a composite using half Katahdin, quarter white Dorper, quarter Romanoff, and those were baby making ewes. And so it gives a little twist on how you view commercial production.
Sure.
And then the other aspect of that was moved there Christmas, and so getting around meeting producers in early part of January, February.
Then eventually came to
Texas. Let's go back home. Got excited to get back into the classroom, be with those kids. At that time, my daughter was a sophomore, had a nephew that was a sophomore, a nephew that was a freshman, and then I had, my son coming up, my youngest daughter, and then my niece that was coming up all through Blanco, and then, I've got all these other kids. So I was really pumped and excited about my opportunity to be an ag teacher. And then I found out Brady was leaving as the livestock director here, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to just look into things down at San Antonio. So I called Jeff Thane and asked him. I actually ran into him. It was here at San Antonio the first week of the show for the breeding sheep, and said, hey, I heard that the position came open. And so through the course of the next few months and conversations, they hired me to become the livestock director here. And so that was very exciting. At the same time, a little disappointing that I wasn't able to be my kid's ag teacher, but at the same time, I think it was one of those things where my kids, it was a pretty tough conversation, because fortunately both of my girls had won a scholarship, but Craddock had been reserved 3 years in a row. And one of the conversations, he said, well, Dad, when am I going to win my scholarship? Because we had said if I took that job, they weren't going to be able to show here anymore. So anyway, that after a little bit, he conceded that it would be okay for me to come work at San Antonio Stock Show, and it has proved to be an amazing opportunity for me and my family. The kids enjoyed coming and getting a little break in their show season, and coming to see all their friends, but not having the stress of, show dad and everything else going on.
I didn't realize that. So when you took the position, your kids were not allowed to.
Correct.
Show?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I think that's, I'm glad that you brought that up, a little bit of the disappointment on, from being an ag teacher role, because as you were talking about that whole chain of events and how everything kind of came around, you didn't get the extension specialist job that, basically you had set on this trajectory to come around back to, but for everything you had been working towards and kind of molding your direction, that ag teacher role is essentially on a smaller scale and, maybe a little more honed in, still very much what you had been wanting to do.
Absolutely. And I'm one that the good Lord guides our path. And,
for us, everywhere we have been, a road has been paved. And so this was just another door that opened for us. And, look back, we could have done things a lot different, but I don't know that I would have ever done anything different.
Sure.
Because, like you said, every step we took prepared us for this. And so, if I look back, I showed at San Antonio. My dad participated here, and then he was an agent here. I showed at San Antonio. Then I was fortunate enough to win to earn a scholarship through their 4-H program, San Antonio scholarship, and then so went to school with the help of San Antonio, and then left the state, came back. Even while I was out of state, had the opportunity to come back and judge the breeding sheep and the market goats and the Angora goats. So that was a blast for me. And then to come back and be a parent and then be an ag teacher and then now switch gears and be on the show management side of it. Man, San Antonio has played a huge role in my life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how long have you been here now?
Just finished 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
7 years.
It's hard to believe.
We appreciate you giving us your story.
Sure.
And I think now it's time to get down into some meat and potatoes.
Let's do it.
The first topic that we have on here is the current state of youth livestock shows.
Mm-hmm.
The mission of today's major stock shows. What would you say that San Antonio's mission is, or do you have a mission?
Yes,
Mission/vision?
we have a mission. We are a volunteer organization that emphasizes agriculture and education to develop the youth of Texas. And that is our heart and soul. And right now, we have probably never been so focused on that mission with everything that we have coming up in terms of, new buildings, the vision for our future with year-round programming, the other educational opportunities that we have for individuals in our area of the community. And so yeah, and I think with all of our stock shows, agriculture and education is what it really boils down to for these kids. I mean, that's the heart and soul of why they were started, and I don't think any one of us has lost the focus on those things.
Sure.
Absolutely. I think that, one thing to highlight there that you talked about, and everybody that's ever been to a stock show, listeners out there certainly remember this, is they're volunteer organizations.
Absolutely.
And we talked about this whenever we first got a chance to step into your office and just how that structure looks like for San Antonio. But, we talk about all the things that have to go into planning these, and, we're, stock show dads, stock show moms, ag teachers, county agents. We can show up and we can bitch and think, golly, why are they doing this? Why is this line not moving so fast? But at the end of the day, those are guys and ladies and maybe youth that are sitting out there at night, getting there at 3 a.m., that are volunteering their time to make all this happen. And I say that as a stock show dad that
Mm-hmm.
has been on the other side, that's like, what is going on? Why am I still sitting here? But I think that we can all, as stock show season gets closer, remember, number one, obviously in Texas, we're very fortunate with what we've got.
Absolutely. You bet.
Our major show run, and obviously, Dallas in the fall, and even, Grandstand and what those guys and, some of the district shows. Hell, we can boil it down to our county shows. We are so fortunate, the opportunities that we have for our kids to compete. In every one of those, I had an opportunity to judge in Iowa this weekend, and they have one of those showdown deals, and I had that conversation with the lady that runs it. Like, they're volunteer ran.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are people in, your position, and you've obviously got, some staff, but as you can, reiterate, none of that happens. You can't put this bad boy on by yourself with, a whole pass of Indians. It takes all of those guys to put that on. So, that's one thing, as you kind of talked about that, and you talk about the vision, you talk about where San Antonio is, and obviously San Antonio being one that's, one of, I would say one of two that drives the bus for our major show season. The volunteers here at San Antonio, it seemed like, I would say, as good as it gets.
Sure.
And certainly help make this thing happen.
It's one of those things that we're in communication with our volunteers throughout the year. Obviously, more at sometimes the year than others. But those of us that are full-time staff members, we are getting to put together the playbook, and we're getting to do a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff while they're doing their jobs at their particular workplaces, and then as we get closer and closer to the show, we start continuing to give them more and more of the playbook that's been put together. And then without them, when February hits, and even before then, we start setting these barns up in October, and without those volunteers setting the barns up, then we're going to have to pay somebody to do that.
Sure.
And when you start continuing to pay things out as a 501c, it's kind of hard to hold some of that money back to be able to give to your kids in scholarship forms. And so that's what we're ultimately trying to do is find ways that we can give as much money back to those kids as possible. And so our volunteers, we have a little over 7,000 now here at San Antonio.
Wow.
But I would tell you that within just the livestock show, you're looking at about 1,500 volunteers.
Wow.
And so just to put some perspective on that, and we have subcommittees of those livestock volunteers that hit, each one of our various shows. And some committees are stronger than others, and in terms of numbers. And you look at that first committee that everybody's introduced to, and that's that group on Salado Creek property whenever you're coming in.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of our most important groups, because that's what everybody sees when they first come in. And we recognize that's our welcoming party. And when you're not feeling welcome, it's hard to get you feeling welcome by the time you get to the barns. And so we want you to have a good experience out there. And but that's a small staff, and they're working some long hours and hard hours. And so the appreciation for those individuals and the grace and mercy that our exhibitors can give them out there is very much appreciated, because we can't not do it without them.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you feel like? It's going to be kind of a two-part question. What do you feel like are some opportunities for continued improvement, and what excites you the most about the future of San Antonio?
I think we're always looking for areas that we can improve on, and so one of the things that we do right after show closes, March, we're working through financials, trying to get everybody premium checks and auction checks and all that kind of stuff figured out. But then April, we kick up focus meetings, and we break down every aspect of our show. And so in those meetings, we have our volunteers that ran each one of those areas, our superintendents that ran each one of those areas, and we try to be as hard on ourselves as possible and identify the things that we did well, but more importantly, identify the things that we need to be better at. And so a lot of our changes come out of those meetings. And so to say, this is the next improvement we're going to make, I don't know that I can give you that one, but know that every step we take, we're trying to identify what is that next improvement we can make that's going to make this show better.
I think as you kind of dive into that, and that was one of the things we kind of had, and I'm sure that's probably an opportunity as you're sitting through those meetings, you get to kind of highlight some of your successes, and you have to, you can say, hey, we had this many people here, and hey, did y'all see how well that junior show, man, that thing went off without a hitch. Like, we didn't have anybody show up at the office and complain, and everybody got their weight card in on time. So I'm sure y'all have some of those.
I wish that was always the conversations we were having.
Yeah. No mad ag teachers, no mad stock show moms. In those meetings, if you could pinpoint what is probably that biggest challenge that you have to leave there and say, okay, that's something we've got to get better at, or hey, that's something that kind of continued to rear its head? What's something that is a focal point, it seems like, in your role that can come out of those meetings that could be a big challenge for?
Probably the one that we all have the biggest challenge with are the chairs and the campgrounds. If we want to get right down to it, that's the big thing that we have when we start coming in. We start talking about space, and you know, we want everybody to have a good time. We are not the fun police that are trying
That's Sam. Sam's the fun police.
to
they
ruin everybody's time
they
here.
accuse me I don't ever have fun. So.
I mean, that's why we do it. We do it because we enjoy it, and we want it to be enjoyable for our exhibitors. And so, but when we walk into the barn, there's more chairs in the barn at move-in than there are animals, you know, for the longest time. You just know that that's going to create challenges.
Now, I do put a limit on the people that go with us, and they'll back me up on this. They're allowed 1 or 2 chairs. That's it. Because I for some reason, I hate lawn chairs myself.
I can get behind
that.
And I get it. I guess maybe explain to, is it a safety code that y'all are worried about? Is there a fire marshal? Is there something that, and obviously, too, there doesn't need to be 10 million chairs. I understand
Sure.
that. But what are the camp situations, and what problems do they pose to the San Antonio Livestock Show?
Well, I think with anything, we are concerned about safety. And, you know, if we look back to when I first started here, the way the barn was laid out, we still had our animal adventures over in the western part of the sheep, goat, swine barn, and had some other activations over there. And so our sheep, goat, swine pens were even more densely packed than they are now.
Yep.
And our alleyways were narrower. And so one of the advantages, I mean, COVID taught us a lot of things and forced us to make a lot of decisions that actually ended up being good. And so we said, well, we've got to widen the aisles. Well, that allowed people a little more room to stand outside their pens and still be close to their stock, but not be standing on top of each other. And then we moved Animal Adventures to a different part of the grounds, opened up that western barn, and that allowed us to expand and give us some space. At the same time, we tried to build a little more space in that exhibitors could sit down and you know, be comfortable. But with that, if we do have an emergency, that's going to be one of our challenges, is trying to make sure that we get folks out of the barn safely and can do that without getting somebody hurt. Also, we want to make sure that we're giving people as much opportunity to sit down. And then when you go in there and you look and you've got 5,000 chairs out there and only 2,000 of them are occupied, that's just space that is keeping somebody else from being able to come in there that got pushed up against the wall or wasn't able
Absolutely.
to come sit down. And so I think the rush west and claim the land and plant your stake
Real thing.
is a little tough. And then, you know, we've gone to the point that we said, hey, we want you to put all of your fitting stuff in the pens, and we don't want you, you know, have it out in and amongst the campground area, because that's the campground area. That's for the exhibitors. It's not for the animals.
Yeah.
Y'all can check animals at the pens. You can check animals at the end of the alleyway, whatever, but it doesn't have to be set up such that it's in the middle of the campground where people are trying to sit and relax and, you know, play 42 or spades or whatever while they're waiting on class time. So yeah, we want folks to come in, but at the same time, man, if folks would just be considerate of their neighbors and, you know, they don't need to take up as much space, condense all that down, and that would eliminate a good majority of the gripes and complaints that we get every year. and it would help us as a major stock show and other major stock shows, because we're all having this challenge. At San Antonio specifically, though, we don't have the land or the space to build a tent that we can get y'all out to.
Put everybody out there and
Absolutely.
I'm going to just go ahead and say, if you did, don't build the tent, because that just created more rules and regulations, and now they all have to be in a line, and I don't agree. Anyways, we'll walk on from that. But us as show dads and stock show mentors, I'm not going to call ourselves jocks, can help reduce some of that, I think, and know that at least maybe in our crew, and to hear you explain that and know that it's not a witch hunt. It's not.
No.
It's easy to armchair quarterback this thing, and you come in and you're stressed, and you're like, damn, Brian Faris, he just wants to kick all the chairs out and all the coolers out, and we just can't have no fun. But it's not. At some point it is a safety issue, and I get that. If all the crazy things that go on in this world, if we needed to evacuate this barn fast, and or paramedics needed to come in and out, I get that.
Yeah. And we've gotten better. Something as simple as painting lines on the floor did more for us back, what we do that 4 or 5 years ago. And people respected the lines. And for the most part, people have respected the lines. In some cases, we still have those that, want to push the edge a little bit. But we just ask that folks respect those boundaries that we put out there. And when we ask, put all your stuff in the pens, put all your stuff in the pens. Because that's one of our biggest headaches is we don't want our volunteers being the bad guys. Our volunteers are there because they want to be there. They love doing this. They need to be here with a smile on their face, patting these kids on the back. I mean, we've got some of the, like y'all said it, greatest volunteers, and they just want to encourage kids.
Yeah.
And to ask them to be the bad guy and police be the chair police, that's not fair to them. And then as a staff member, there's nothing more frustrating to me than to walk up and down these aisles, especially during the sheep and goat show, because that's where a lot of you are that I know. And, I'll ask somebody to do something, and they'll do it, and then I come back, and they're right back to doing the same thing. And so we put signs up, and then signs are taken down. Those are the kinds of things
I have not taken any signs down.
as show management are so frustrating, because we try to put everything out there so we can, make everything as equal as we can.
And I think you've been fair. Me and you've had those conversations.
Yeah.
You've came back there to West End of the Barn and said, "Hey Sam, let's try to move this around, move that around." It wasn't like get your crap and get it out of here. It wasn't a dictatorship. But I've had those conversations,
sure.
and it's always worked out, I think.
One of the things that we always like with our crew, like I love being back there. I call it the black hole back there in the corner, because all the action's up here,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot more space back there. It's typically not as congested. It's not as crowded.
Cooler.
And it's a little cooler. Yeah. You're not kind of, there's that point there in the middle of, the two barns where it can get, really, really hot.
Or with the right north wind coming through at the right time, it can be really cold.
It can be cold back there, yeah.
But, there's room, and I think it's kind of like what you said, the land grab, everybody's wanting to be close. They want to be close to the ring, whatever that looks like. I think the biggest thing, and I would say, like Sam said, obviously even people in our role can help, facilitate a lot of that, because it is like, keep your stuff in the pen. I'm not a chairperson either. I just assume we don't have any of them. I would much rather have the stuff that we actually need. But there's plenty of room if we're being honest. Like
yes.
there is. If we, if we're efficient with our space, and this is coming from someone that has, a traveling circus that's fairly large, and we've never had any trouble. Like we try to be efficient. We try not to bring 10 buckets of the same stuff and 17 different show boxes that all have the same stuff. And I think that people can probably maybe even listen to what kind of how we travel, and maybe even take something away from there of You don't have to have one of everything and one of every person, whether it's a group that travels like ours does or some of your bigger 4-H groups or whatever that looks like. Like, there's enough space for everyone to get done. It never fails. By the time we're all trying to get settled in and weight cards, everybody's pulling their hair out. We're crammed. We're not going to have a place to fit our legs. Like, what are we going to do? And then by the time it's all said and done, we have plenty of room.
Yes.
Yeah,
Always.
In the next day, the finals and crosses and downs and hairs are done. And
Yeah,
most
then
of
you
those
have
people
that
left.
much more room.
You have more room. And I think a lot of this comes with time and maturity, right?
Sure.
As I've gotten older, I've realized
Fact.
that's not worth the battle. It's not worth the fight. We're going to get through it. We're helping each other out. I don't care where he bought his sheep or how he fits them or what he does. But if he needs something of mine, I'll let him use it. He needs something of mine, I'll let him use it.
Well, and that's why, being part of these counties or the ag teachers, we always haul together, and there's that camaraderie of hauling together and getting to know one another and, being there to support each other rather than just having to be there for yourself. There's just so much more fun to that. But yeah, as we come in with these groups, and depending on the size of your group, we try to stall you in a way that we're not going to label tack pins, but we're going to give you enough space that when it comes down time to get busy, y'all can condense animals and, not get animals that are, put them in positions that are going to be, bad for them. I mean, let's face it. Yeah, the sheep have gotten a little bit bigger since I would have shown them back in the 90s, but we were in 5x5 pens, and we were putting at least 4 to a pen.
I feel like four, yeah.
And so now we've got 6x6 pens, and people are flipping out when we put 3 of them in the same pen. And so, it's a matter of perspective, and I think that chair deal is one of them. I mean, we didn't grow up taking a chair because, at that time they were all folding and had that funky straps on there and stuff, and they weren't near as convenient as they are now.
Now it's a contest of who can buy the coolest lawn chair.
The nicest one.
Yeah.
As you talk about that, and I kind of want to be specific for the listeners, and I feel like as we're talking about camps, we're talking twofold there. Groups being larger groups that are coming in, whether those are folks that travel together or bigger FFA chapters, and camps being more 17 coolers, 27 chairs, 3 fold out tables, all of that. As you and kind of getting back to that, those groups that are traveling together, you hit on it. It was the same way. I grew up in Reynolds County. Like, we had a caravan of families that all showed together, hauled together, cheered each other on. We're right there in the mix of everything. That's how it was. That's how it was growing up. I don't think there's any question whether you're talking, maybe on the 4-H side or the FFA side. That demographic has changed in recent years for 100 different reasons, but that has kind of changed, and you still see some of them, and obviously some of those counties that I would say have probably stereotypically been very, very strong leaders in those counties. The ones that touch Tom Green, the Suttons, the Gillespies, the Kurt. Those are ones that tradition. Those ones they've always expected to have someone in place that they know they can rely on, that they know that can help them get through and navigate all this. Now, as that has, changed, and you see more of these, what let's call them, groups that are traveling together, or maybe, the breakouts in the different demographics. What does that trend look like from San Antonio's perspective? And not specific to that, but just what does that trend look like? Stock show families, and kind of how maybe that shift has happened in I'd say the last 5 to 10 years.
Splintered.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you've got a strong county agent, you've got a strong ag teacher that are leading those programs, and they're going to promote hauling together, and get 100% behind that. I wish, honestly, everybody would do that. At the same time, you've said it, times have changed a little bit, and our programs have changed a little bit. Do I wish we could get every one of them back to that type of format? Absolutely. But we have seen more and more groups haul together, and so I think we just from our standpoint as a show want to manage the move-ins as efficiently as possible, and so to try to put everybody in individual counties or chapters or whatever makes that a little bit more challenging, because then you get here and then you start mixing and matching, and then we've got this part of the barn super tight, and so we've tried to have a little more flexibility with that, but it's one of those things that, man, if there's a club or a chapter that's starting to try to promote that, I want to get behind that. I want to push that and tell those kids, I may come see you if we sold you a lamb or whatever, and we're gonna help you on feeding that animal or getting him drenched right or whatever, then I may swing by your pen and come see you, but haul with your county.
Yeah.
Work with your county agent, work with your ag teacher, and I think a lot of times we short circuit this because we say, well, that ag teacher doesn't know anything, or that county agent doesn't know anything about what we're doing. Well, I think it's just as much our responsibility to teach them, because a lot of our county agents and ag teachers may not have always come from a show background, and if they're willing to be there and learn, then let's pull them into the fold, and let's tell them why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it, and because that's just going to help that program.
So I'm gonna be kind of direct in this question.
Yep.
The rumors out there that some of the major stock shows are anti anything that's not a 4-H agent or an ag teacher. Where is Dr. Faris's stance on? Well, I guess where was Dr. Faris's stance on guys like me and Logan?
Guys,
obviously, it's not too bad, because you're here on the podcast. But
well, I'll talk to anybody. I'll listen to anybody, and that's the way I've always wanted to be since I got here at San Antonio. I wanted to be an open book and listen to the folks that maybe, as Logan said, we may be going to disagree on things. We're going to agree on things, and we're going to agree to disagree on things.
Sure.
And so I think that there are individuals out there that are filling a role that we may not have right now available to us in some counties and some chapters, whether that's in whatever species.
And we can agree that there's some of those that are filling those roles that don't need to be filling those roles. Maybe their intentions are wrong.
I would liken it to, we need to be focused on the kids and developing kids.
Amen.
And developing kids into great adults. And at any point that we can't look that kid in the eye and tell them that we're doing this the exact 100% right way, that is when we have a problem. And those are the individuals that I would say that personally, those are the hard things for me to tolerate, because it's when we have poor leadership from adults leading kids, that leads us down a path where we're not raising good kids.
Yeah.
And one of the things our 4-H and FFA programs have always been well known for are growing good kids. And that's what I want to make sure that we're focused on and doing it the right way, that we set the right boundaries on things, and that we are raising those kids the best way possible.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anybody that's, no matter what camp you're in, that's not going to agree with that being obviously first and foremost. And, and I think you probably hit the nail on the head. And I've always said this within our group. Obviously, we're in a role, and I came from a role with a parent that was a ag teacher and then jumped into the extension deal. So I feel like I still play that role with our customers that buy sheep from us, just don't get paid by any agency. I think that's probably where, I don't think, I know that's where all of a sudden I didn't wake up one day and say, I would like to have 75 families travel with me, and I would like to have to be telling them what to drench their sheep every time. I can promise you that was not the plan. Like I would much rather drench Joe's and Graham's and go eat a steak dinner and, go to bed. But as we can all agree on, and it doesn't matter who we're talking to, there is certain people that are missing someone that can, help advise that. And I think wrapping back around, just to kind of where we're at within the industry, we've got a lot of families that didn't grow up in the 4-H or FFA program. We've got nurses, we've got a doctor, we've got a lawyer, but their kids are showing, which is, for lack of a better term, badass. I mean, so good that they are wanting, where they didn't grow up in that program, but they see the value in it, and they're wanting their kids to be involved.
Absolutely.
Now, they don't, they're having to try to navigate it, and that's probably how they kind of, landed on us whenever we sold them sheep or goats or whatever that looked like. And maybe they don't have someone in that role as an ag teacher, as a county agent. We can sit here and, I think if you'd have asked me 15 years ago, could I see myself in a position that I'm currently in? I grew up with Marty Gibbs and Marvin and Steve as county agents. Dad, obviously, is an ag teacher. You've hit on, having Preston. You'd never even think that there would be a need for someone that is a breeder to, go along and help. Obviously, there's some of those counties and there's some of those ag programs that those guys, they're on it. But I think we've seen, and we saw it last week whenever we were at that ag teachers conference, and I'm wrapping that back around to talk about helping those guys that want to be involved. We had like 200 ag teachers step into that conference to listen to sheep and goat production. There were ag teachers that didn't know how to start shearing a sheep, but they're willing to learn. And I'm always like, hey, buddy, if you're willing to learn, or hey, if you want to learn, young lady, stand right here. And I'm an open book. Like, we'll talk about it all. Like, this is why we're drenching with this. This is why we're going to rinse this one at this time. Because if those guys will take the initiative, they will build that program up. And maybe they got into a deal. Maybe they came from another area. Maybe that's just not. Maybe they're great on the swine side. Maybe they're great on the cattle side. But sheep and goats, it's like, I don't know. And and I think we see that a lot, specifically on the sheep and the goats. Guys that are incredibly good stockmen in the swine world, in the show pig world, or maybe in the cattle world, they look at sheep and goats and are like, yeah, I don't know what to do. We're literally, I would say right now, we're kind of all feeding them very, very similar. Like, it's just still livestock. Like, let's keep them healthy, let's get to the show, all this stuff. But I think that's probably, just kind of hitting and kind of wrapping that around just as things changed. And it's well documented, the challenges that public education has on trying to get, people in that role. And so now it's kind of created just a different demographic and a different look of
gap. I think there's a gap.
Yeah,
I was surfing on Facebook last week. There's so many open ag teaching positions right now, and county agent positions too. And there's still really good agents out there. There's a lot of really good agents out there, but small ruminant based agents. It's not like it was.
It doesn't seem
when you were a kid and I was a kid. And
I think too, we see a lot of camps, obviously, that people are putting on throughout the year, and I think those are great. And as long as we keep pushing, I think our extension agents and our ag teachers and trying to get those folks out there and keep them, because again, they're the base of the program.
They have to be.
Yeah.
They
absolutely. And then when you look at it, and I think back to us, to growing up and thinking of the other dads that were in Sutton County, and there were some that as their kids would be starting, they're learning it. And then, they continue. Well, then next thing you know, they've got it down and they're passing it along. And I think that's the other part, that in any one of us, whether it's y'all or whether it's ag teachers or county agents, that as we're trying to teach the parents too, as much as the kids, that way, at some point there should be a weaning period.
Yeah.
You know, we might still give them some final, suggestions, because that's one thing that every one of them is going to do. But at the same time, let's get you to a point that I can wean you off of the contact with me directly on every single thing. And then you can call me for some of the finer points.
Yeah, I always like to say, I don't have to tell you to wash your water buckets. We're past that point,
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we can all agree on that.
And I think that's what, like Logan and I doing the ag teachers deal last week. Myself and my wife Jeree, we put on a driven camp in Fredericksburg every year. We'll have 200 plus kids there, and we offer county agents and ag teachers free entry. If a county agent or ag teacher wants to come and learn, it's free to try to help support that system, because we know that we need those. I think to me the sad fact of this stock show industry is the rumor mill that goes around.
Couldn't agree with you more.
It's terrible, and I think it's on both sides of the equator here, right? The rumor mill that all people that like me and Logan are bad people, or we're outlaws, or this or that, or Brian Faris is a bad guy.
You're an outlaw. I'm not an outlaw.
Would you say that they don't write books about the sheriff? Or that Brian Faris is making these rules and doing all this stuff just because he hates people. The rumor mill in the stock show industry is one thing that's terrible. And you said it earlier. If I claim to be a Christian, I can't judge. And that's something that I need to work on, is not be as quick to judge everybody and judge people. And I wish that the whole industry would come to that.
You mean like blowing Facebook up?
Yeah. Quit being quick to judge. And we had that conversation on the phone, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I admitted that.
Yeah.
That, and that's why we're here right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
Is to discuss that stuff.
Yeah, so social media can be a great tool. It can also be a devastating tool. And I think anytime we get out there, the rumor mill, is bad, and it can take us down some roads that we don't want to go down. And that's something as simple as a rule that may be being proposed, or a rule that has been made, and everybody's going to give their 10 cents on it. And with the way it was posted, people may not even really know or understand it, but they're going to chime in on it. And so it's one of those things. It's kind of good to go back to that old deal. If you can't say anything nice, you just probably better not say anything at all. And unfortunately, there are individuals out there that are not. I liken it to a pickup football game. What's the first thing you do when you get a group of kids out there and they start, getting ready to play a football game? Where's the sideline and where's the end zones? So we've set our boundaries.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody needs to set their boundaries. And if you're playing within those boundaries, then we're doing it the right way. But when we step out of those boundaries, then there needs to be some severe consequences.
So, and I obviously, to reiterate, I give Sam a little hell because his comment on Facebook, which is 100%. No, I want to be clear though, it's 100% why we had the opportunity. Dr. Faris reaching out to Sam and having some dialogue and having a chance for us to sit down. As we get into that, and we kind of had us understanding, and I think that probably kind of is the big key point here that we can take away. Us as stock show dads, ag teachers in their role, county agents in their role, anyone that's involved. There's been some changes. You guys posted them the other day, the Fast Pass being the one that, we had, I guess the biggest concern or, heartburn. And, as we walk through this, maybe there isn't going to be whenever it's all said and done. But help us understand what goes into that? You know, I know you talked about meeting with those committees and those subcommittees. That is over. I'm assuming without doubt that, you know, you didn't just wake up on, you know, one day after the 4th of July and say, I think we'll take away fast passes and we're going to make them a randomized drawing. And we know that didn't happen. And I think everyone out there, but, you know, specifically, you've talked about, you know, the first people that we see is those folks that are working, those volunteers that are working in the parking lot. And, you know, some of us have been driving, you know, it's not like that is such a melting pot for things to go wrong. I mean, if we're being honest, we're grumpy, you know, you're worried about sheep, you're stressed, like all the things that can happen. And then, you know, you get there and Lord forbid, you know, the line be a little bit long. So walk us through kind of, you know, and obviously we want to hit on the fast pass deal and kind of what that looks like and why those changes, but help us understand how those decisions take place.
Sure. Well, and, you know, just to give some perspective on y'all's move-in, when you're moving in market lambs and goats, we're also moving in first wave of breeding heifers, and we're also moving in our all breeds bull and heifer sale cattle.
Yep.
And so that is our busiest move-in. And, you know, this is one of those things, we have these conversations about how we handled things. And gosh, it was 3 or 4 years ago, we had lines all the way back, you know, down I-35 access road. And that's a safety issue, and that's not good for anybody. We've got ways, you know, to work through rail pros to help us manage trains and things like that. But ultimately, there were a lot of people hitting that barn at one time, or that lot, and then ultimately the barn. So that's when we moved the lambs and goats back to a 12:30 move-in. And the last 2-3 years have been pretty smooth in terms of our unloads. Now, granted, we've had a few challenges where we're not getting trailers to the barn quick enough, or for whatever reason that we hit a lull. But those are those meetings that we address those. We recognize that, hey, we saw that this year, and then we have that conversation. What is it that we need to talk about? Where was the hole? And you know, what do we put in place to fix that? But when we get to the premium pass thing, you know, that's been one of those.
And hit on that real quick for folks that, you know, might not know exactly what we're talking about. Why was that originally put in place? How did that look?
What's that? The premium pass?
On the premium pass, yeah.
So that would have happened, I guess, the year before I came. But the whole effort of the premium pass was to consolidate trailers. And if we could run fewer trailers with more animals, then we're going to unload faster and get everybody in the barns faster.
Absolutely.
And so...
and make a little money to support.
And make a little money to support.
Yeah, a little burrito money.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's, and for guys that are listening, those are passes that were sold. They sell 20? Is that?
It depends. Most of them are 40 per move-in.
40 per move-in, and you have to have 5 animals.
Now you have to have 8.
Yeah, that's gonna change.
That's going to change.
In the past, we had to have 5 on. So guys that are listening, that's kind of what we're hitting on here. We try to always kind of just, surprisingly enough, there's people outside of the state of Texas that have nothing better to do than they drive down the road and they listen to me and Sam. So sometimes we get some deals like, what are y'all talking about? What is this? So the premium pass is a deal that San Antonio has had in place where if you kind of condense down and you have enough, on your trailer, you can buy that pass. And it does. It expedites. And you get to move to the front of the line. It's kind of
It is your, pass through Salado Creek property, the staging lot. And then it gets you to grounds, but it doesn't promise you're going to get to the front of the line at grounds.
Right.
So it gets you from I-35 to grounds without very much time. Yeah. And, you may have to wait 15, 20 minutes.
Sure.
Depending on, but you're not going to be sitting there for hours. Yeah. So again, we had a case a few years ago that, some folks had to wait a little bit, and they're calling me frustrated, and hey, you're about to get to move a whole lot faster than everybody else.
Yeah.
So again, if everybody just keeps things in perspective, it helps. But that pass was initially a premium pass. Everybody calls it fast pass, and I think if I understand the story right, the premium pass was chosen because they didn't know if it was going to for sure be fast. So we wanted it to be fast, but I don't know that everybody knew that for sure it would be fast. So the terminology is everything. So started the premium pass, and then and of course the sheep and goats were selling out, and it started in a few species, and then we've expanded that, and the last 2 years, I want to say year and a half ago, we sold out in a minute and a half in some of them. And then
I know, talking to Andy Hart, our county agent, the pig boys, I mean, it's just cutthroat.
There are 120 of those between the two barrel waves and the gilt wave, or the gilt show, and they go extremely fast. And the sheep and goat ones go fast too. But what we saw are, I mean, these things are selling out like a major entertainer, and so we had to do something a little different, because we're hearing back from our county agents and our ag teachers that, hey, I don't have internet speed like everybody else does, and they're on at the same time as all these other agents. How is it that they are every year that they just can't get one bought? Well, their internet speed's a little slower. So knowing how much of a hot commodity those are, we said, okay, we've got to step back and we've got to reanalyze and make a change. And so we said, well, what would a random draw look like? So now we'll allow the ag teachers and county agents to submit between the 15th of October and the 25th of October, up to 3 per move-in. And so I think that's one of the confusions is, we're writing these notes and we're giving them handout to our ag teachers and county agents and 4-H agents, and then we're explaining these notes as to why we've got them in there. So we're not going to give you everything that is related to that rule in that document. But premium list will come out in September, and you'll be able to see all that. So with that, we've got those premium passes. You can put in to up to 3, but it's what you need. It's not putting in 3 chances. It's putting in, you need 3 because you've got that much need for that many trailers, or hey, I just need 1. And then we're going to run those through a randomized drawing for all the counties or chapters that put in for that particular set of premium passes. And then we're going to run that round. And, Edwards County needs 1, and they get drawn, they get 1. Lubbock County needs 3, and they only get drawn once. Well, they're going to get 1. And then they're going to have to figure out what to do, for those. And so it's not a perfect system, because we recognize there's going to be some that are going to have to figure out a way to haul the extras, or they're going to have to get a longer trailer and put more of them on that trailer. So there's never a perfect system that we're ever going to be able to design around this, but we're going to try this. And then we're going to evaluate it, because, you never know until you try something. I think that's the thing. Most people get afraid of change because they don't know what the outcome. They're not fearful of the change. They're fearful of what the outcome's going to be. Yep. And so we're hoping that on the other side of this, that we found that this works really slick, and that we're able to get all that done. And then it's saving the agents and ag teachers a lot of heartache that are trying to log in at 9 o'clock on the morning that those open up, and then they've got exhibitors that are upset with them because it's their fault that they didn't get them.
Yeah,
didn't get their passes.
Do you think that there's ever an opportunity to, maybe since this is a randomized draw and some of the big groups, like there's a probability that some of the big groups like Logan's group or my group, we can't get a fast pass, we can't come in together, but maybe those that do consolidate and haul in together could maybe get a set of pins or be pinned together or anything like that? Is there ever that opportunity, or why did, I guess the real question is why did we transition away from that? Because it used to be we could pre-pin, do things like that.
Yeah,
now,
and that was specific to the sheep and goat barn.
because you know, we had talked on the phone the other day, and you said you wanted to still encourage people to consolidate and haul
Sure.
as much together as they can. But playing devil's advocate here, you know, if they do that, or we do that, we're not rewarded in any way to do that, right?
Well, I'd say that your reward is that you are all still coming in together. You're all going to still get pinned together. You may end up having to wait a little bit longer, but you're all going to get in the barn in the same spot. You know, in regards to going away from the pre-stalling, you know how it is. I mean, people start fussing that, you know, well, so and so is always getting these pins, and I don't ever get the opportunity to get those pins, and then we have some that you know, we just hard to put all of those together and keep everybody happy. Sure. And so sometimes it's better to just step back and just do everything the same. And we don't show favoritism to our stalling office has no clue who's driving that truck. And so they can't make a decision based on who's that driving that truck, or who's in that county or chapter or group or whatever, as to where they get put in the barn. And that's kind of where we've landed it on that. You know, to say that there's not an opportunity at some point down the line that we look at something different, you know, I'm not going to say that, because I think we always try to keep our minds open for what is the next best thing.
Yeah, I got to be fluid and, you know, adjust. And I'm sure, in, you know, a role like you've got, it's a whole lot of flying by the seat of your pants in some of those situations. You hit on it briefly. In the past, we had to have 5 on the trailer. Mm-hmm. That has now changed to 8.
Correct.
Okay. Well,
eight on the sheep and goats, 8 on the pig,
8 on sheep,
3
goats, and
on the
swine,
cattle.
still on 3
Okay.
on the cattle. And the reason why, so, you know, people have said, why don't you sell those things? Well, we could sell them, and we could make a heck of a lot more money.
oh, black market fast passes are, yeah.
And so those can't be sold.
Oh.
Uh-huh. See, I'm calling y'all out here. So
So you're not going to let it be like the Fort Worth Steer Show where you know.
Hey, I'm not talking about any other show.
Enter 19 of them.
I'm not talking
Make
about
sure
any
you get your
other
3.
show. But no, the one thing on these premium passes is, you know, we feel like we offer a good number to help us get a lot of trailers unloaded and get them through, and, you know, we'll deal with the rest of the trailers. If we add a bunch more,
It just turns into another line.
then
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
another line.
No,
And
yeah.
then, you know, while we're going to keep it at 500, because, you know, we still recognize that's a good value for that. And there's some that would be willing to pay more. Obviously, we know that. But at the same time, there's a lot of those kids that, you know, hey, if we can put 10 together and I only have to pay $50,
It's a good deal.
you know, yeah. So so anyway, that's what we still trying to, you know, find a way that we can offset some costs here and there, but then move some trailers.
What is the only other thing? I know there was a lot of changes on that. Obviously, premium passes, you know, was a big deal. There's some changes with yearling ewes
Yeah.
and does. That's a new thing. Hit on that
Yeah,
maybe real quick,
so,
just kind of
yeah,
what that
on
looks
the,
like.
on the commercial ewes and does. So this year, those 2 shows and the crossbred gilts, you know, those 3 shows have really grown, and we've seen those numbers continue to grow. And so we were able to go to our scholarship committee and make a proposal to add 2 more scholarships for those. And so now we're going to have 3 scholarships for each of those, for crossbred gilts, commercial does, commercial ewes, and then we'll give an additional $5,000 for the grand champion of those. In that, it made it a little more difficult on the sheep and goat side. You know, well, then we've got this older group. And so, and you know, at the same time, I step back and look at it from a production livestock scenario and go, do we really need
to still be showing that?
To be showing those if they're commercials at this time?
Yeah.
And then what's really hurts my heart is when I look at some of them, and some of them are smaller than the heavyweights in the lamb and the doe division. So or the doe kids. So anyway, that was something that we just said, you know, rather than having a fourth division, we're just going to take those out, because there was, relatively speaking, a very small number of those animals that were being shown.
Yeah, I would agree with what, you know, from an out. We have not done the ewe show. I know like what Sam and them have, or even the doe show. For us, that's always been a little challenging, just living in the Panhandle and coming down, you know, the day before or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, from an outsider looking at it, it seemed like that. Well, honestly, it seemed like if you wanted to go get you a scholarship, that might not be a bad place to jump in there and do it. But I agree. At some point, yeah, hang your cleats up and you know, go into production.
Do you feel like that? Was there some talk around? Obviously, there's never a good time to do it, right? Because it's going to affect somebody. But maybe some of those exhibitors in the state that might have already purchased a ewe that's in that kind of December to January range to come to San Antonio, and now they're just eliminated pretty much overnight.
Well, that are December or January borns, or
yeah, because come February, you know, they probably will be missing a tooth, and
yeah. And so one of the things, and again, I grew up in this industry, and so it's one of those things where we try to think through some of those things, and so and this will also be impacted on the registered breeding sheep side. You know, we said we were going to put them in classes based on dates, and the reason why and I'll come back around to the tooth duel because it'll catch both. But we have a lot of people out there that sadly don't know how to tooth a sheep.
Yeah.
And so when they show up back here at our books to come into class, and we're checking our books, and you know they're actually a yearling, well then we have to change all the books. And then, you know, if they get to the yearling class and they actually have a lamb mouth, well, they missed their class and we can't go backwards. And so everybody can look at a birth date on a paper and then get their, and, you know, hey, people that have ethics issues are going to have ethics issues when it comes to papers. and it's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And so, but to help try to kind of curb that, we're going to go back in there and check those mouths. So we're going to look at these mouths on these doe kids and these ewe lambs, and if they've broken over and have a tooth, you know, because that's the worst feeling in the world. You get to the show and that night they spit a tooth.
Sure.
And, you know, that one's out. Well, that one's okay. That one's not going to be out because we recognize that that's they've just toothed over. Are they 6 months older than what they said they are or what they are? Probably not. But, you know, we feel pretty strong about that those teeth are going to give us some guidance. And so in our lamb, we're going to call them fall yearlings, because essentially that's what you've got to be a yearling in our breeding sheep show, is you've got to be a fall born, because all those are going to cut over. And then anything that's got 4 teeth are going to be aged. And so so we're going to, you know, kind of do that as a way back, so to speak, or classification. You know, we're going to go through after they've been pulled. They'll check their mouths and they should be able to be good to go. So that was the reason why we did it that way.
As we're talking about, you know, kind of the changes in the, you know, new stuff. It's new stuff coming down the pipe. And this, I guess, might kind of hit a little bit on the rumor mill. Let's talk about the leg wool deal. You know, I know that it was kind of brought up. It was a thing that was kicked around and discussed. Didn't get into the premium book as far as I can tell this time. But what's the thoughts on that? What does that look like? Where did it come from? You know, just generally speaking. I mean, we don't have to dive, you know, 100% down that well. We could probably spend, you know, 2 more camera batteries on it. But where is that coming from? What's the place that it's coming from? What's the idea behind it?
come down the pike on that one. And like you say, we could spend the rest of the day talking about it. You know, I think it's one of those things. We've been fitting boots for, gosh, how long? I mean, since we started shearing sheep.
Slicking them.
And I mean, we started slicking sheep years ago. But I think back to, you know, I've been fitting boots on fine wheels and crosses all my life. And we didn't get crazy with them. And I think what we've gotten to is we've taken that to an extreme. And when I look on Facebook and people are saying, well, how long can you grow your boot wool? You know, is that really a good thing? Because in the grand scheme of things, maybe, and this is Brian Faris's opinion, I very much still go back to production agriculture. And I go back to, why did livestock shows start? And it was a way to feature livestock that we were raising on the farm or ranch and, you know, promoting high quality stock. Well, when we get to that point that we are focused on something that has no economical value in the grand scheme of things in terms of production ag, I think that's something that, you know, we might need to check our battery just a little bit and say, why are we really doing this? I can understand the aspect of, you know, well, we want them to appear that they have more bone. Well, actually, is bone better? Because, you know, anybody that's raised stock that once they get bigger bone, you have more problems with lambing, calving, kidding, you know. So those are kind of some of the things that I start thinking about from a practical standpoint. I think it's hiding some of our structural problems. You know, you can't see if one of them's as cowhocked as you think he is. You can't see and I think even the way some of them are shaped now, it tickles me to death, you know, the way we trim some of them, because it's not accentuating and not helping the animals look. I think some cases it actually hurts.
Absolutely.
And so makes them look narrower behind. It makes them look like they're more sickle hocked. And so I think there's some things there. And so it's become this trend, so to speak, that has, I think, reached an extreme. I mean, I love the look of a good boot. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me there. But I also want folks to understand that there's practicality in everything, and extremes only go so far. And so from that standpoint, that's why I look at it. Now, when we start talking about it from a show management side, think of everything else that has come along with those boots. You know, when we're trimming those, you know, and just knocking a little wool off of them, it doesn't require near all of the stuff that everybody brings with now. And so everybody taking the time and the space, it's harder on us as shows to manage that space. And I think we've done a pretty good job trying to balance that of getting it in the pens. But then, you know, we've got people that fuss at us, well, you're taking up too much space in our pens. We don't have enough room now for our livestock because we're having to fit our boots. And then the other aspect of it is, I'm one that I want to see a kid work. I get so frustrated when I see Facebook posts that, well, are you trying to make people, you know, lazy or this, that? And I don't think that has anything to do with the kid's ability to work hard. I just want to see kids work hard in areas I think that are going to have the most impact. And I think when we push kids to fit boots and all that, I mean, I kind of think about, is that just me telling my son to go out and dig a hole and then fill it back up again? What's the reward for that? Now, if I tell them to get on the front end of one and spend a lot of time on the front end of one getting them broke down for showmanship, because we all know we can take an average showman with a great sheep and beat them with a great showman with an average sheep. And so I think it's just, everybody's time is so precious now. And every family's time is so precious that, where do we choose to put our emphasis? Now, there's some families, they are show families, and that's what they are dedicated to doing. And that's okay. But at the same time, we've got a lot of other families that are choosing not to do this because they go, wait a minute, just to be competitive, I'm going to have to do that. Well, why? And can we give them a really good reason as to the why? So I think that's where we're at. From the boot wool, the leg hair, when I first heard that term, livestock judges using shag, about sent me through the roof. Because y'all judge livestock. Mm-hmm. How much does that, do you place a class? Did your livestock judging team coach or your dad tell you place a class on leg wool?
No.
So but
I think that brings up a good point on the evaluators. Like for kind of what you said. Yes, there are some things that you could hide. I think it probably puts a little bit more emphasis on obviously having the right guys in the ring holding the mics. I think at the same time, I know personally for us, and I will agree with what you've said, because there will be probably plenty to, that we can, what we said, agree to disagree. But it has went to an extreme. There's not anybody in this industry that is not going to agree with, setting down a Coke can and seeing leg wool 4 inches bigger on both sides, that's not an extreme. I think that without question, it has taken some of the practicality and the real world stuff out for some of those that maybe are breeding for trends. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I don't think there's any question that I know us personally, and I would say we probably fall into that. We're stock show families. We have been forever. We spend more time in the barn doing things because of that, and I don't think that's an all bad thing. I think we get our sheep halter broke earlier. I think we teach them to jump on the stand earlier. I think we're just involved in them, especially during the summer, prolating and, some leg care and just kids getting their hands on them. So I don't think that's an all bad thing. But anyway, well, actually, I'd say that's very much, a positive. I'm not 100% convinced that if those families, like you mentioned, and I've got some of them too, so I'm not saying your point's not accurate. If those families were playing baseball, they might not go to batting practice either. Mm-hmm. That they, and I think a lot of it is probably like what you said, time is valuable. A lot of these kids are involved in everything, and at some point maybe they had to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, well I don't have time to do, to manage legs, so I'm not going to show. I have trouble with that because, and we're pretty efficient with our system, but our system is very much, one kid's rinsing, one kid's blowing, then we've got them on bungees, then they're hand walking, and so we try to be efficient with our time. Mm-hmm. Because we are obviously doing a lot of the same stuff. At some point, some kid's probably gonna have to leave and go to baseball. Someone's gonna have to leave and go to soccer. If you're efficient with it, I think that you can have them fuzzy enough, have it look good, have them groomed well, and you could spend 3 to 5 hours a week, doing that. Now, again, some of it's been taken to an extreme. Some kids feel, or families might feel, the need to do it every day. We've talked about this countlessly on the podcast. We try to do legs 2 to 3 days a week, and we usually show up, and ours they're good. They're groomed well. They look healthy, and it's a visually appealing deal. But at the same time, our kids spend a lot of time. Maybe because of that, they spend more time in the barn, I would say, than I did showing. Growing up, we would go and, Dad would say, hey, let's go, walk sheep, brace them, set them up in the yard. All right, now we go put them up. And now it seems like, and I would say just more of the hands-on, getting them out of the pen, jumping them on the stand, fixing a leg wrap, some of that just minor stuff hey, there ain't nobody that does legs that's not going to say it's a pain in the ass. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
100%. I don't know if that, from, again, going back to the rumor mill and, some of the things we've heard, if slicking them off is the answer to get more kids involved, and all of a sudden those kids will now say, oh, I don't have to do legs. I think I'll show now. And that's, hey, we can discuss that 100 times over, but I think those might be the same kids that might say, I don't have time to go to batting practice today because I got something else.
Well, and it goes back to, talking about the rumor mill. I've heard several people make the comment, well, the only reason Brian Faris wants to do this is because, he wants to see a Dorper win the whole thing. Oh, my gosh. I mean, I'm sitting there going, do you know where I came from?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we showed a lot of Dorpers, but at the same time, my heart's still in the final cross world. I love those sheep, but but you think back when we showed them, none of the blacks had any wool on their legs.
Yeah.
I mean, all the medium wool sheep out there, they were all Suffolks, and so they didn't have any leg wool. And so that's where we look at that and we realize that these trends they're going to come and go. This one hasn't gone, but I think more than anything, it's gone to the extreme. And here's and again, this is not a Brian Faris rule as opposed to what I think a lot of people. I think I'm getting a lot of credit for something that I just made a comment on one time and then somebody ran with it. But I don't want it to be about me. That's not what this is about. I think it's let's do something that's positive for the industry. Now, I think if things took a dramatic turn and folks helped the major shows with keeping stuff in the pens and out of the fitting area, the camping areas, and reduced all of the volume of stuff that shows up here, I think that's where exhibitors could really help themselves if they want to keep this. I think too, if they start tightening them down a little bit and go the other direction, and let's really, hone in and make a Coke can instead of, a dadgum gallon coffee can.
I think, and I'm going to speak on play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Right. I agree with Logan. I look at it from a standpoint of any time that I can spend in the barn with my kids is quality time.
Sure.
They're not in the house on the TV. They're not on a phone. They're not on a Xbox or whatever they play now. And I get that there's some people out there, like you'd said, that stated that, well, they're not going to show if they have to do this. But if we change something, we hurt the other people that do work hard at it.
I disagree with that respectfully because, if it's not going to change who the kids are that are winning, I'll admit that. And I've always said that,
We're just going to find something else to spend our time doing.
That's exactly right. And whether that's working also with their pig or also working with their steer or working on their livestock judging reasons or their FFA creed or, food challenge or whatever that may be, going to church, there's so many other things. And for families that, you're dedicated to that, that's great. Don't want to take that away from you. At the same time, I personally want to see people, focus on the things that matter, that I can defend, that has a place. We're working these animals, we're running them, we're tracking them because we're managing fat cover, or we're trying to build muscle in their leg, or we're trying to make them look more like an athlete. Those are things I can defend. It's hard for me if I had somebody come up and go, well, what good is that boot wool? We had a commentator one time that he said, I'd love to see that it was a breeding ewe, I think it's South Down ewe. He said, I'd love to see her come out to my ranch and see how much burr clover she could get caught up in that. And then we're going to shear that off and we're going to throw it away. So those are kind of some of the things that I look at.
And again, we're talking about changing times and where we're at now. There's a big separation between commercial sheep raising and show sheep.
Yeah.
And when we change these things, it not only affects, like what kids are doing or things like that. Maybe the same people will still win that are winning because they're going to concentrate on other things. But, that affects us as breeding decisions and what we do when there's a whole list of things that it affects. It's not just affecting
no doubt
San Antonio Stock Show,
but
shear the boot wool off.
How many sheep, really good ones, that are out there, especially fine wools and fine wool crosses, that might not have quite enough boot wool to be what people are considered ideal and that would even get a shot, and they're culled and thrown out the backside and they go to the commercial market because they don't have quite enough leg wool, when they're probably a placer, that they hit a sale spot if there's not so much focus on leg wool. And that's, again,
and I still don't think I see I really don't. All the stock shows I've been to and listening to judges and stuff like that, or even talk to evaluators after the stock show, I have yet to have one say, man, I used that thing because he had the biggest boots in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have not yet to see that.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a guy that comes in here and evaluates, or gal, and evaluates the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo and uses the Grand Champion Lamb because it has the biggest boots in the world, we've got some serious issues, right?
And I think that's our position at the majors, or our responsibility is to make sure that we've got the right people in the ring.
Yeah.
But what y'all know, though, at the same time, what dictates things here also dictates things all the way down to the county level. And when I do hear, kids say, and I say kids at that point because we're usually talking about younger judges straight out of college or something like that.
Judging county level shows.
And even jackpots to that, well, that one's just showier. He's just got, better boots, or he's got more leg wool, or when I hear people say, well, you can tell that kid's obviously put a lot of effort in, on their boots. Sometimes that's just genetics.
Oh, a lot of times.
So I'd say that's more than anything.
Yeah.
But, I don't know where we'll land on this. And I think that's, honestly, that's the least of our worries. I think there are bigger
issues,
concerns, that I won't go into a lot of detail on, but I think y'all know where I'm coming from. I think that there are some issues that we've got to be more concerned with.
Absolutely.
Now, if we get together as shows and show managers and decide this is the route that we need to take, then that's the way we'll go. But it's not something that you're going to see San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo go out and say, well, we're not worried about anybody else. This is the way we think. And so, all the decisions that are made, you asked how, and I didn't get to that, how these decisions for rule changes and things like that come up. Well, when you've got volunteers that have shown, have kids showing, have grandkids showing, you've got superintendents that are all from that world, whether they were county agents, ag teachers, extension specialists, university professors, professionals in an ag-related industry. We have the best folks to refer to when it comes to making decisions that are going to benefit kids, because that's what they've dedicated their life to. And so I think, there's some question, whether or fear that there's this big divide between, major stock shows and exhibitors. And I don't know that that's the case, because if you look at our stock shows, most of us, as I mentioned earlier, we're all showing, or, I just graduated my youngest one, but I couldn't do it here at San Antonio, but we were in the barn with all of you at all the other shows,
Yeah, and I think, like the Facebook post that I made and all the people commenting on there, I still think there's still a separation, though. I really believe that, and that's what I want to do. And I told you this on the phone. I want to be a positive voice for San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo. I don't want to be a negative voice. And how do we bridge that gap? Because I think some of the exhibitors and families may look at, some of the superintendents and stuff that are at other stock shows, and they think, well, those guys are huddled up around the water cooler, and they're puppet mastering the whole thing, right? And they're changing the rules. Now, again, some of this is rumor mill, but I'm just telling you what's said in my part of the world.
Right.
They're puppet mastering this whole deal, and they're changing the rules to benefit them. That's what gets said out in the public, and that's why it's good to have this dialogue and this conversation like we're having now, is that there's reasoning behind a lot of these things, right? It's not
everything we do has a reason, you know, and to me, it's whether it's to benefit them, I don't know how it's going to benefit our superintendents, because most of them are either retired agents or ag teachers, or their kids are out of it, or they don't have a personal dog in the fight anymore, but they want to continue to see the program grow and continue to not forget where we came from. And so I think that's the big piece of that puzzle, is when we start to break down a rule change or a decision as to why we're going to do what we do, it's not on a whim ever. And we talk about how does this going to impact this group, or how's it going to impact that group. Some people have asked, could we go into scheduled move-in times? Well, that'd scare me to death, because then who do I let in at what time? Because then I'm going to get yelled at by somebody that didn't get the right time. And so not saying that's a bad idea, but it's something that we are going to throw out ideas. We're going to throw out potential changes, and then we're going to break them down, and then we're going to decide, is that going to be something good for our show, or is it going to hurt our show?
I think one of the things that you said, and I think for folks listening to, again, we talk about the rumor mill, and we all hear it, and we probably all fall suspect to, talking about it also.
Yeah, we're guilty of it.
Yeah, everyone is. San Antonio, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, probably isn't going to make a drastic decision like that without communicating with the other shows.
Sure.
And so that's one thing that I think folks can maybe rest easy on. Now, if all you guys get together in a round table and decide that that's what's best, hey, then that's where we're at. I mean, as stock show enthusiasts, that's where we're at. But I think that's the thing that folks can probably rest easy knowing is this isn't going to be, okay, hey, we got to have, our legs groomed and well taken care of at Houston, but then San Antonio is going to have something different. Angelo might have something different. It's probably going to be a fairly even playing field across the board. There's going to be a lot of dialogue back and forth, folks voicing their opinion, folks for it, I'm sure probably folks against it, just like what we sit here and talk about. And so as listeners, I think guys can understand, and I think also going back to, kind of what you were hitting on, those major decisions, number one, aren't taken lightly, and number two, aren't made on a whim. So it's not going to be something that's going to be a plug and play into the 2026, 2027 book. It's going to be something that's going to be talked about. And, hopefully from our perspective, if something drastically changes, we have time to, plan accordingly. And so I think that's probably, something to emphasize for the guys out there listening, just, kind of wrapping that up.
No doubt. Well, and let me expand on that just a little bit from the standpoint of, we were talking about, we were at the 4-H Extension Agents meeting yesterday, and then, we went and talked to the ag teachers Friday a week ago, and then the county agents Monday a week ago. And so all of those we're giving them now this is the tail end of it. Now we're already telling you what's coming for 27. But back in May, we met with our county agents and ag teachers who've had a chance to get together with their cohorts and hear back from exhibitors and hear back from their people within their counties, and then they submit that to the Animal Industries Committee, and then that Animal Industries Committee compiles all that and then brings that to the show and in the form of commendations and recommendations. And we joke, but that commendations list is always a little shorter than
Yeah, I bet that's right.
there is a lot of recommendations.
Yeah.
But those recommendations are needed because they're going to put their thoughts out there. Now, one of the things that I found as an exhibitor, as a show dad, all of those things, ag teacher, coming into a show to manage a show and put on a different hat. There were things I wanted to bring with me as an exhibitor. I'm like, man, I'm going to take that to San Antonio. We're going to change that. We're going to make that better. And then I get in here and I start having those conversations with the volunteers that have been here and been doing it for years. And, they say, Brian, that'd be great, but we can't do that.
Right.
This is the reason why. And so also know that we have a great dialogue with our county agents and our ag teachers and our other major livestock shows. We usually will meet after that time and just our stock shows, and we'll talk about things, what are the areas that we're having the most trouble with, or that we feel like as a show community that we need to take and push this forward. So we have those conversations, and now we are all very different shows. We're all part of what I'd say the Texas Major Show circuit, but our size, our geographic location, all our time of year dictates, certain aspects of our shows. And I think each one of us, it's neat because I think each one of us kind of have a unique identity.
For sure.
And so some shows are going to do things that they can do that other shows can't. Now, chances are that's not going to be one of these big ticket items.
Yeah.
But the big ticket items, we're all going to come together and work together because, again, we all have those same goals in mind.
Yeah. That's no, I think that's all fair. And I think that's very good dialogue. And again, we can always be on opposite sides of it and hear each other out.
Sure.
See where we land. Katie, how are we doing on time? I know we're
2 hours.
I know we're going a long time. Are you good on battery?
Yeah.
I was gonna do a little bit of a rapid fire and lighten the mood coming off of shearing slicking legs. Okay, so Brian, these are just kind of quick questions. First thing that come to mind for you: coffee or energy drinks?
Neither.
Are you you got
I do not drink coffee. I do not drink energy drinks. We got on Advocare in 2001. We're distributors, all that stuff, and we have been faithfully committed to Spark ever since. Shameless plug for Spark.
Yeah, there you go. That's somebody we need to reach out for sponsorship.
That has.
I tried that one time. I turned this green with your shirt.
That is the
Now,
first.
it is not the Spark Energy, whatever the can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first one that most people, actually surprisingly, and probably for a good thing, very few have been energy drink consumers. Morning or night person?
It really depends on the time of year, but usually early morning.
Yeah, early morning. There in San Antonio, it's both.
Yes.
Okay. Favorite breed of sheep? I shouldn't I say that. So I guess we've been kind of asking favorite breed. I guess it can be very general if.
Yeah, but you're talking.
I'm going to guess here to land on.
Yeah. Guy, but it's hard. My heart still. I've got strong ties to the Rambouillet world, but I love the Dorpers. I love what they bring to us in terms of commercial ability, and then they're making some darn good show sheep too.
Absolutely. There's no question there. Vacation spot. You and the crew. Where are you going?
Well, we've been to beaches, we've been to mountains, and we're kind of more mountain people. Yeah.
You know what? I hear that means you're getting older if you're wanting to go where it's cooler.
Well, I don't know. My wife is one that she can sit on the beach and read a book. I've got to be doing something.
Yeah.
I cannot just sit.
I'm with you.
If you were going to go to a concert, what would it be? Herbie, I say you probably get some front row seats to some of these guys that have.
Are you kidding me? We're all sitting there working. We're trying to move y'all in or something. So, I don't know. Zach Top's been pretty fun lately.
Yeah.
I like that guy.
I can get behind that. Favorite stock show that you get to attend with your crew? You know, obviously, San Antonio doesn't fall in that, but favorite one that you really enjoy.
Well, honestly, we didn't get to. We love Fort Worth because that was our breeding sheep show. We'd go up there with all the Dorpers and the kids, and my dad and my sister and her family would come, and that was a huge family deal for us. So, and that Dorper breeding sheep world is a big family, and so you know that's old homecoming week. So that's great to go to Fort Worth. We didn't go to Angelo for a long time. I did take Presley her last year, and but it's just so close to San Antonio. It's hard
tricky
for me to get over there, and I'm one. I want to be there with my kiddos, just like you said, Sam, working with them, and so that really leaves us getting here and then going to Houston, and then and that. I tell you what, you want to figure out what stresses you out is knowing that you've got a pen full of lambs at home, you know, or I say a pen full, 2 or 3, depending on how many kids you have at home, that you're trying to get ready for Houston, and you're doing a 3-week stock show right ahead of Houston.
Absolutely.
So that, but we always love Houston. You know, it was the facilities there are incredible, and then you know, just it's the big fancy one.
Oh yeah.
So we loved Houston. And then, you know, Austin, we were able to go to a couple of years, and my dad will tell you I'm one of the tightest people in the world, and so if I don't need one on feed very long, I don't keep him very late, and I don't feed any extras. And so if we have one we think is good enough to make a spot at Austin, then we would have fed one, and we were able to hit one this last round, and we missed them by the crying hole before. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I like all of them. I think, as I said earlier, they all have a little different flair.
That I wanted to kind of wrap back around to one thing you mentioned, and you had mentioned while you were in Kansas, you know, the evolvement of the Dorper, you know, and just kind of where that's at. Briefly talk about what you guys are doing at home. You know, I know for a long time, and you know, Preston was involved in the goat deal forever, and then. Sure. You know, the sheep deal, it seems like from an outsider looking in, specifically on the Dorper game, I mean, that's pretty, you know, front and center at the moment right now, I would say, as far as kind of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the one thing that I will say that, you know, Sam, you made a comment earlier that there's a big divide now between the commercial industry and the show world, and I think it's gotten actually a little closer, if you really think about it, than what it used to be, because I mean, we gutted these lambs out and they were railed out, and you know, there was not the body and the belly and the fill in them that and now we want that rib and volume in them. And so I think that those, we are kind of going back to some of those features that are better for raising commercial livestock. I guess the one thing in the Dorpers, they are so good at what they do and making a living for us on next to nothing. The drought, I mean, our ewes stayed fleshy and they were productive. I want to be careful that we don't run a breed trying to make them showy. And I hate the term shallow fronted. I despise that term. I don't mind them being up fronted, but I don't want them shallow fronted because that takes production out of them. So I hope that we continue to raise good sheep there, as we are bringing a new breed across the country into the show ring, and I think, you know, Dorper breeders would say the same thing, but yeah, I mean I enjoy seeing these Dorpers do well from Pennsylvania to California and every point in between.
We I know both of us, you know, we utilize them a fair amount, you know, in our embryo and our recip program, and I'll never forget the first year that we had them. I just fed them like my blackface ewes, and you know, we get to like 3 weeks before those things are lambing, and I mean, bellies are dragging the ground, udders are dragging the ground. I'm thinking that I'm gonna have to cut every one of them out of them, and those things, just spit them out, cleaned them up. And, where we're at, Texas Panhandle, I mean, we've had a ton of guys. And obviously with the cattle market as wild and crazy as it is, we got a lot of guys that are turning sheep out. And, I'm not going to sit here and speak for all of them and say that it pencils 100% better. But they're looking at that and they're thinking, hey, this still don't look too bad. And especially while the cattle market is as crazy, they're like, hey, we can kind of diversify a little bit. Maybe we don't have to buy as many stockers. I mean, there's some opportunity there. And, you think about, you get north of Lubbock and some of those guys up in that part of the world that have been pretty anti-sheep for a long time. You drive down the road and you see some hair sheep out there and you're like, they're kind of starting to come around a little bit. So I wanted to hit on that because I knew that you guys were obviously very passionate about that breed and hadn't been involved in it, for the longest time. And
sure,
I think they're great for us from our standpoint, is because we still have some ranch country. So, if we use them as recips, we put embryos in them. When we put an embryo in them, they go straight out the barn, straight into the pasture.
Yep.
And I don't mess with them until about 3 weeks before it's time to lamb.
Yep.
And they just do absolutely fantastic out there. But it's also created another, revenue stream for us as well, because those that don't take the eggs or whatever, we can breed those back to a hair buck. And, there's a nice check every spring, late summer, whatever, when we take some of those to sell barn. We hauled some last week and they sold like gangbusters.
Yeah. Even amidst all of this discussion we're having with screwworm and everything
screwworm,
like that.
And now a confirmed case on, where was that at? In Utah? Scrapies.
Yep.
But they're still selling good. And from a show guy through and through, having a commercial aspect there really helps bring it in.
Well, and I don't want to prolong this too much, but at the same time, one of the questions that y'all had asked is kind of some of the, where are we looking? Man, I would love to start a commercial lamb feeding program or something like that, where much like our commercial steer program, because I think it gets us back to the industry side, to the real nuts and bolts of why we do the sheep world. And you guys are in it, but let's face it, there's a lot of kids that walk into that show ring that if you asked them to go to manage a sheep operation, they'd be scared to death.
Absolutely.
They wouldn't know what to do. Yeah. But so hopefully, maybe down the line we might see something like that.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting topic. And, kind of back to what we were talking about, there's a lot of, whether it's inner city kids or just, kids that are showing from more urban developed areas that, they don't have that opportunity to maybe see what the commercial aspect of it. They think feeding their sheep twice a day or their goat twice a day or whatever their project is and cleaning out their water bucket, that's sheep production. And not that that's not a very important piece of it.
Right.
But that's obviously, from what we know, removed from real world stuff.
Sure.
So
sure.
No, that was good. Before we kind of wrap up here, I know we got, you kind of had some stuff on our printout deal. You hit on the scholarships a little bit. Talk about the scholarships, the sale, support. Man, where San Antonio is at. I know we've hit on the volunteers, but probably the guys that are sitting there in the ring and obviously using their hard-earned income to support the youth of Texas. I mean, those guys, I don't care how many thank you notes we write, they don't get enough. What does that look like? I mean, feel good about where things are at, where things are moving in the future?
Our junior livestock auction, I think, set a record this year. They were able to break the $7 million mark. And so we were super excited to see that. And we may not sell as many spots as some shows. We may not, but I think we try to send every kid home with a pretty good chunk of money. And that's just hats off to that committee and to those buyers. And, we've got various buyers groups that form across the state and come down and support the sale. And so, they do that. We can't thank them enough for being a part of the show. And, ultimately just to really boil it down and to think people are just giving money freely of their volition to these kids that they don't know. And but they believe in what they can use that money for and the good that they can make out of it. I mean, good grief, that's such a blessing and so exciting. So So yeah, I'm super excited about where our auction continues to go in that committee and the work they're putting forth. And our scholarships, like I said, we were able to add some scholarships in the commercial ewes, commercial does, and the crossbred gilts. We continue to find contests that we can start. We're looking at trying to do a drone competition because ultimately, if we look at agriculture right now, drones
they're huge.
Are a big part of that. And so there is a group of kids out there that are really good at that kind of stuff that may not have any cares to show a livestock species. And so being able to work that in, that's so exciting to me. But I think if I remember right, I did added it up, and I think between livestock show, ag mechanics, junior shootout, Western art, wildlife, which is our taxidermy contest, we'll give away about $1.91 million in February, just during the month of February.
That's I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's one thing I wanted to hit on whenever Sam, you were talking about taxidermy. Mm-hmm. There's a taxidermy contest. I mean, if you would have told Preston 30 years ago, hey, your kids, when he got that sheet of all the things that he could sign, have kids that are involved in 4-H to sign up for, drone competition, taxidermy contest, Western art. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and I know a lot of the other shows are doing other things, but I would say outside of the livestock sector, and obviously this podcast and a lot of our listeners are, listening because, like I said, they had nothing better to do, or, they're wanting, some insight into all the mistakes and the screw ups that, we've made personally in terms of sheep and goat production. But there's so many opportunities for those kids to be involved. Like there's nothing that they can't find if they want to do something. Sure. I mean, there's something. If they're involved in this program, if they don't have to have them a sheep or a goat project. Obviously, we want them to have that, from our side of things. But man, there's so much going on, and opportunities for those kids, just like you talked about that drone deal. Texas Panhandle, for a long time, crop dusters have been the way, and there's a lot of aerial spraying going on with those drone machines. Mm-hmm. And what those guys are doing. So there's opportunities that those kids can tie into things that they're interested in, that they can also utilize down the road.
You bet.
For sure.
Bet. Well, and then, we actually took a few steps a few years ago to, not even, I guess, to not even compartmentalize it to just 4-H FFA. If there's, because there's some, unfortunately, there's some schools that have done away with their ag program, or their kids are it's such an inner city urban area that they may not have access to some of the 4-H programs that they might want, and so we've worked through through some CTE departments now that food challenge, agrobotics, photography, some of these things that videography, these things that kids are still going to be active in and participate in, and may one day be a career option for them. Being able to have a competition and then potentially have a scholarship sitting on the back side of that for those kids is
that's huge.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. Well, to wrap it up, I want to say thank you again for having us here. It really does mean a lot that you would take the time out of your day to talk to two old outlaws like us. Hopefully,
just don't be outlaws.
That's
the main thing. Just don't be outlaws.
I ain't bringing no chairs.
No chairs. Thank you again for having us. We appreciate it, and hopefully, we can continue to have conversations in the future about things, and help portray that in a positive light back to our community and our followers. And I think the end goal is to, whether what side you're on, is to create participation, because we know we're in a shrinking market, and we've got to continue to help build the future and get kids involved. I mean, that's our end goal.
You bet. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. And I think it's one of those things where all of us as major shows, I won't speak entirely on our behalf, but I think all of us as major shows, we want to have good dialogue. we want to know that we are doing the best for our kids, and I think everybody should feel comfortable knowing that the decisions that we make are always we're trying to make the best decision for those kids. And so so before you knee jerk on a reaction or something, give us a call. I don't know that there's any of us that are not willing to talk to somebody or send an email and or at least send them to me and give me a chance to give you the backstory behind some of the things that we do. And I think we can continue to be positive on Facebook, and we can be nice, and we can take things in a much better direction along the future.
Sure, absolutely. Do you want to do the whole thing?
Wrap up.
Just short.
Yeah, no, so, again, reiterate everything Sam said. Having an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Faris was, I think, everything we probably thought it would be. Again, like we talked about from the beginning, folks that are listening, if you expected, Ali Frazier and, 12 rounds of a heavyweight title fight, that wasn't what it was going to be. There was dialogue, and I think Dr. Faris said it, it's amazing how far we can probably get just by communicating. And, everybody, like you said, everybody's after the same goal. Sam hit on it. We want kids to be involved. We want participation. We want this thing to still be around whenever our kids have kids. And I think, realistically speaking, that's something that if we don't have dialogue and we don't have communication and we're not all on the, pulling the rope in the same direction, there's a reality that could be something that could be threatened, agriculture in general. So, again, reiterate everything that Sam said. We appreciate the opportunity to sit here and take time out of your schedule. So, guys, if you've been listening, again, we've had Dr. Brian Faris. He is the director for competitive events here at the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo. Gave us a tremendous conversation. Lots of stuff to kick through, lots of stuff to listen to. Probably not something you'll be able to listen to all in one setting. That'll probably be unless you got a long drive. Again, always feel free to reach out if you've got questions, thoughts, concerns. Love to invite you to follow us on all major platforms, or you can reach out to drenchline.com, look us up. Thanks for listening. Take care.